Within his own borders there exists a leader who reigns like an omnipotent deity, ruthlessly scrutinizing every aspect of his citizens' lives. He dictates personal consumption, coerces corporate investment through intimidation, and maintains a pattern of extrajudicial interference that ignores the fundamental laws of the market. To the media that dare expose his failings, he applies pressure by cutting off essential advertising revenue. Upon foreign enterprises, he inflicts punitive measures, and he attempts to silence international criticism through the threat of criminal investigation. Barking orders at his subordinates as if they were instruments of his will, he privatizes state power to suppress the populace and flaunt his absolute authority. He goes so far as to shackle religious leaders whose domains ought to remain sacred sanctuaries, and crushes even the minor resistance of innocent citizens under the weight of state power, while demanding maximum penalties akin to judicial execution for his political rivals. He grants total immunity to his own followers, applying a blatant double standard. Within that narrow, insular kingdom, he remains possessed by the grand delusion that he is the center of the universe. However, the moment the stage expands to the cold reality of the international community, the Tower of Babel he built crumbles into ruin. In international summits where fierce national interests and cold calculations intersect, his once triumphant expression instantly freezes. It is a wilderness where no one grants him special treatment, and where his internal authority carries no weight. Only then, facing walls on every side, does the ruler realize the devastating distance between the illusion of a great leader he fabricated and the reality of a, quote, solitary autocrat. This is not merely a failure of diplomacy. It is the collapse of an ego addicted to power. Psychology. It is the total bankruptcy of trust within the international community, international politics. And it is the site of karmic retribution, where illusion collides with reality. Eastern philosophy. Power grants a sense of omnipotence, but it also delivers a dangerous swamp of delusions. The tragedy begins the moment one believes, my judgment is beyond reproach. All criticism is treason, and everyone worships me. This tragedy is not confined to autocrats alone. An arrogant executive, a self-righteous manager, or a dominant head of a household can all lose their grip on reality and walk the path to ruin. To ensure that this spark of thought which monitors arrogant power and awakens society spreads further, please share this message widely. Sharing is the first step toward driving significant change. A corporate executive possesses power over employees. A military commander possesses power over soldiers. A manager possesses power over a department. Even within a family, parents exercise authority over their children. Whenever human beings possess authority over others, they face the same invisible psychological temptation. Power grants enormous influence, but it also produces one of the most dangerous illusions imaginable. It whispers, my judgment is always correct. Anyone who criticizes me must be malicious. Everyone around me supports me. Once this illusion takes hold, people slowly lose the ability to distinguish reality from the world they have constructed inside their own minds. Throughout history, countless leaders have collapsed not because they lacked intelligence or strength, but because they lost contact with reality. Today's lecture explores this universal phenomenon from 3 different perspectives. First, we will examine examples from international politics to understand how isolation appears on the world stage. Second, we will analyze the defense mechanisms described in criminal psychology that allow individuals to justify destructive behavior while protecting their fragile self-image. Finally, we will compare these psychological processes with the symbolic teachings found in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, particularly its descriptions of attachment, illusion, and karma. It is important to emphasize that these spiritual discussions are presented not as religious doctrine, but as philosophical metaphors that help illuminate the human mind. Whether one believes in an afterlife is entirely a personal matter. What concerns us today is the remarkable symbolic wisdom these teachings offer regarding pride, fear, denial, and self-deception. As you listen today, I encourage you to resist the temptation to think only of politicians or famous leaders. Instead, ask yourself difficult questions. Do I truly listen to people who disagree with me? Have I begun interpreting criticism as an attack instead of an opportunity to grow? Am I living according to reality or according to the comforting beliefs I have created for myself? These questions matter because every one of us exercises some form of power. Leadership is not measured by how long someone remains in office. True leadership begins with the courage to admit one's mistakes and the humility to listen sincerely to others. History repeatedly demonstrates this principle. The rise and fall of civilizations, governments, corporations, and even families often depend upon this single virtue. My hope is that today's lecture will help us understand not only politics, but humanity itself. May it encourage us to choose conscience over power, humility over arrogance, and empathy over domination. If you enjoy thoughtful discussions that combine psychology, philosophy, history, and international affairs, please consider subscribing to the channel, giving this video a like, and sharing it with others. Your support enables us to continue producing in-depth educational content, exploring the psychology of leadership and the timeless wisdom of philosophy. Now, let us begin today's lecture. The 4 stages of karmic projection. What happens inside the brain and mind of an isolated leader? Imagine a leader standing alone in the corner of an international banquet hall. Everyone else is engaged in lively conversations. Foreign heads of state greet one another warmly. Diplomats exchange smiles. Photographers capture scenes of cooperation. Yet one individual stands motionless, staring awkwardly into empty space. At that very moment, something far more significant than diplomatic embarrassment is occurring. His internal psychological world is beginning to collapse. Remarkably, the defense mechanisms identified by modern criminal psychology closely parallel the symbolic stages of illusion described in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Today we will trace 4 progressive stages of psychological disintegration. They unfold as follows. Stage 1, embarrassment and shame. The sudden realization of diplomatic death. Stage 2, cognitive dissonance and rationalization, the construction of an illusion that protects the ego. Stage 3, projection and anger, the emergence of imagined enemies. Stage 4, obsession with, control, the descent into psychological tyranny and self-destruction. Let us examine each stage carefully. Stage 1, embarrassment and shame, the moment of diplomatic death. The first stage begins with an overwhelming awareness of humiliation, as other world leaders walk past him, greeting one another while ignoring his presence. The leader's amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm system, immediately declares a state of emergency. His blood pressure rises. Cold sweat forms across his skin. Deep within his unconscious mind, the poisonous emotion, known as shame, begins to spread. From the perspective of criminal psychology, this resembles the moment when a habitual fraudster or a corrupt public official realizes that years of deception have suddenly been exposed before the entire world. The body reacts as though survival itself is under attack. The psychological paralysis is immediate. Visible signs. The leader's eyes lose their focus. Instead of looking naturally at the people surrounding him, he stares blankly at a distant wall, the ceiling, or empty space. His gaze no longer seeks connection. It seeks escape. Defensive behavior. His hands grip a wine glass far more tightly than necessary. He repeatedly adjusts his necktie without realizing it. His lips form an awkward expression, not a genuine smile, but what psychologists would recognize as a strained grimace. It is the face of someone desperately attempting to conceal emotional collapse, while maintaining the appearance of confidence. A symbolic interpretation from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. According to the symbolic imagery of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, this moment resembles the instant after death, when the consciousness first realizes that the physical body has disappeared. The soul experiences overwhelming confusion. Fear replaces certainty. The illusion of control dissolves. For the first time, it recognizes that it is no longer the ruler of its universe. Whether understood spiritually or psychologically, the symbolism is profound. The leader is confronting an unbearable truth. The identity upon which he built his entire existence is beginning to fracture. And with that fracture comes the terrifying realization that power alone can no longer protect him.